Okay, so right here we have the beginning of a truth table, and on the right side we have the sentence that we're creating the truth table for, and then on the left we have the letters that are in that sentence. Okay, so once we have that set up, our next step is to write down all of the possible combinations of true and false for the letters. So all of the possible combinations of true and false for P and Q. And we do that this way. Okay, so T stands for true, F stands for false, of course. So what we have in this column here, this is the situation. So this first line, this is a situation where Q is true. Next line, this is a situation where Q is false. Third line, Q is true. Fourth line, Q is false again. Okay, then over here, we have the same thing. First line, situation where P is true. Second line, same. Third line, situation where P is false. Fourth line, situation where P is false again. Okay, but then in total, we have every combination. So the first line is where they're both true. Second line is where P is true and Q is false. Third line, P is false and T is true. And then the last line, they're both false. Okay, so we have every combination. Next, we want to apply these truth values to the sentence and figure out when the whole sentence is true or false. All right, so our first step is just to copy these T's and F's under the letters that are in the sentence. So we want to copy everything from this column to this column, and then the same for the Q. Okay, so we've done that. Now, the next thing, and the last thing for this truth table, is to figure out when the whole sentence, P and Q, the whole thing, is true and when it's false. And to do this, basically I'm just copying what's in the chapter on characteristic truth tables. Okay, but also we can think through it, so we're not going to translate everything that we do for truth tables, but we also can think about, if we have actual English sentence. So if P stands for Greg is in his office, Q stands for Dr. Cook is in her office, when is it the case that P and Q, this entire sentence, Greg is in his office and Dr. Cook is in her office, is true? Okay, well, if P is true, if I'm in my office and Dr. Cook is in her office, then the whole sentence, Greg is in his office and Dr. Cook is in her office, is going to be true. So we put a T right here below the ampersand. So in this situation, both are true. Both of our letters are true. The whole sentence is true. All right, next line. P is true. It's true that I'm in my office, but it's false that Dr. Cook is in her office. Q is false. Okay, so in that situation, our whole sentence is false. It's false that both of us are in our office. Okay, likewise, if P is false and Q is true, the whole sentence is false. And if neither one of us are in our offices, if P is false and Q is false, then again, the whole sentence, P and Q, is going to be false. All right, so that's a truth table, and this specific truth table is the one we call the characteristic, the characteristic truth table for the conjunction, that is for the ampersand. All right, so these are the other characteristic truth tables. That is just the basic truth tables for our connectives. So here is for the disjunction, for the or. We have the same combination of P and Q over here on the left, and then we find that the whole sentence, P or Q, is true under every scenario except when both P and Q are false. In that case, it's false, and so we have an F here. Otherwise, the sentence is going to be true. All right, for the conditional over here, P arrow Q, this is, I'm not going to go through everything. There's a pretty good explanation of it in the textbook, but P arrow Q is always true except for when P is true and Q is false. In that case, the whole sentence is false. Otherwise, the whole sentence is true. All right, the double arrow, P double arrow Q is true when both P and Q are true, or whatever the letters are on both sides, is true when both are false. But if they don't match, if one is true and the other is false, then the biconditional, the full sentence, is false. All right, then negation. So for this one, we use negation, we just have one letter. If Q, or whatever letter, is true, then the whole thing, not Q, is going to be false. If Q is false, then the whole thing is going to be true. Okay, next I'll go through this example, and this is the example that's in the next chapter, complete truth tables. So you can see it there, but I'll just show you how we put it together. So we begin the same way we began last time, and I should say that over here on the left, the T's and F's should always be in the same order. Okay, so for whatever column is closest to this line, we're going to alternate true, false, true, false. Then we move over one column and we alternate again, but this time in pairs. So true, true, false, false. Okay, next step, we again copy what's in this column and this column over to the other side. So, okay, so that's just straight copying. Of course, it is possible to make mistakes, but sometimes you will, so you want to be careful. But right there, we're not doing anything besides copying what's on the far left. All right, next we have to put letters underneath the ampersand and the arrow. And for this, it's important to understand what the main connectives are. So this is the main connective for the whole sentence, but in order to fill in what goes in this column, we have to have a truth value for this chunk. And so we have to do H and I first, put true and false underneath the ampersand, and then we can do true and false underneath the arrow. Okay, so we just did the ampersand. If you need to look back at the characteristic truth tables, you can. In fact, you should have those printed out. But anyway, let's see what we got here. So both are true, so that means that the subsentence is true. True and false, that means it's false. Actually, I should do this in another color. False and true, that means it's false. And false, that means this whole subsentence is false. Okay, now underneath the arrow, so now what we're considering is what's in this column and what's in this column. So what's in this column here is the truth values for the antecedent, and then of course what's in this column here are the truth values for the consequent. Okay, so again, you should look at the characteristic truth table for the conditional, for the arrow, and when you do, you see that if the antecedent is true and the consequent is true, then the whole sentence is true, the conditional is true. Actually, let me use another color again. Okay, when the antecedent is false and the consequent is true, the conditional is true. When the antecedent is false and the consequent is false, the whole sentence is true. And we have the same thing here. So the whole sentence is true. Okay, so next you want to make sure you didn't make any mistakes. Okay, so this looks all right. So what we have here, what we figured out is that this sentence, the whole thing, so now we have, so these values here represent the truth values for the entire sentence, which at the most general level is a conditional. And what this truth table tells us is that no matter what the assignments of truth values are to the H and the I, every possible scenario is going to mean that the sentence itself is true. The sentence is always going to be true. Our first scenario, our second scenario, our third, and our fourth. Okay, so hopefully that helped you get the basic idea for truth tables. I'm going to go through some more examples in the next video, so you should watch that also.